This is a story of how we, the Unitarian Church of Evanston, have represented the saving message of our faith to the Evanston community. For over a century, UCE has sought to be a beacon for liberal religious values on the North Shore. Sometimes we have gone out into the community to strengthen those voices that support our principles. And sometimes we invited the Evanston community into our sanctuary to share our vision and values. And sometimes we simply stood on our front lawn in silent witness, and then again, sometimes not so silently. Perhaps the principle that informs all of our work is our covenant to affirm and promote the worth and dignity of every person. Our earliest efforts were to make the world a better place for folks in our own community, to improve the lot of humanity around us. In 1900, our young congregation caught the spirit of that great age of social improvement at the turn of the 20th century. Our new Director of Religious Education, Fräulein Julia Hintermeister, called the churches in Evanston together to sponsor a summer camp for underprivileged families of Chicago. Camp Goodwill provided a week-long fresh air experience for 60 mothers and their children who lived in poverty in teeming urban Chicago. The camp was situated in the forested area near Central Street and Sherman Avenue in Evanston. 6 weeks of the camp served 350 families each summer for 18 years. Again, in the spirit of social service in 1956, the congregation opened their homes in the church community to respond to the National Refugee Relief Act, which allowed 214,000 refugees to enter the United States from Eastern Europe if they had a sponsor. The Evanston Council of Churches, in cooperation with the Quaker Church World Service Organization, oversaw the program. Over 2 years, UCE families sponsored 20 families, offering them housing with their own families while they got a foothold in the new country. After 2 years, the nation closed its doors again to refugees, and the program was disbanded. The families who came, however, maintained contact and friendships with the families of UCE. UCE and program organizer Paul Acher received community-wide recognition for their service during the Evanston Brotherhood Week of 1957. UCE opened its doors again to the community in 1965 when teacher B.J. Wagner reported that teachers at nearby Dewey School felt that some of their children could benefit from one-to-one help in mastering their academic work. So the UCE Religious Education Program offered to organize a tutoring program, and the Women's Alliance supported it. UCE teenagers formed the nucleus of the tutoring group. Said Jean Nachman, "I cannot sufficiently emphasize the importance of the help of the teenagers in establishing friendly, cheerful, and trusting relationships with the children. When they all went off to college, the program lost its energy and folded." Some 100 children came to UCE twice a week and throughout the summer to participate. Besides the academic subjects, the children learned about cooking, crafts, and sports. Carrying forward our imperative for social service more recently, Eileen Wiviet has linked UCE up with Good News Partners, a faith-based community organization of East Rogers Park that works to create safe and affordable housing for people struggling with poverty. They have rehabbed and offered space in the Jonquil Hotel of Rogers Park, and our UCE members have helped to rehab. We also develop and participate in programs to support children and youth to grow in capability. In exercising our principle to affirm and promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, UCE has hosted lectures and workshops that started the conversation in Evanston about a variety of often difficult topics, promoting justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. In the 1930s, Reverend Lester Mondale established what became our longest-running program, over 30 years of the Forum. The Forum brought the community of Evanston together to hear the prominent voices of the day and to engage in dialogue around the great issues. The Forum offered an annual roster of speakers addressing topics ranging from racial justice to advances in science to innovation in the arts. Reverend Mondale characterized the mission of the church to preserve the right to a forum for the most radical voices of the period, and the Church stood firmly for this freedom, even in the face of public demonstrations outside its door, conducted by some of the more extreme reactionary agitators of the period. Some of the notable speakers include Margaret Mead, James Baldwin, Henry Steele Commager, Sidney Harris Studs Terkel, and Bruno Bettelheim. In later decades, we have invited to our podium such voices as Julian Bond and Jerome MacDonald. UCE members and ministers were part of the lively humanist movement of the 1930s and beyond. Our Reverend Ray Bragg engineered the project to write the Humanist Manifesto of 1933 and was himself a co-author. Reverend Lester Mondale promoted the project beyond the circle of mostly Chicago area Unitarians, making the manifesto part of a nationwide conversation. Reverend Mondale ultimately signed all 3 editions of the manifesto in 1933, 73, and 2003. Part of our search for truth and meaning surely involves learning about the various faith traditions. Our Unitarian focus on the community of the world's religions has led UCE to promote interfaith learning and sharing. In the 1950s, Reverend Homer Jack and UCE invited the good folk of Evanston to an interfaith Christmas Eve service. Dr. Jack strove to teach Evanstonians about the several faiths that celebrate light in the dark of winter. The Christian story was told, the Hanukkah festival of light was celebrated, and the candles of the Hindu celebration of Diwali were lit. In the mid-1990s, ministerial intern Abhi Prakash Janamanchi with Reverend Frank Robertson helped to gather together the Bharat Samaj, an East Indian society. Bharat Samaj was a group of people within the Unitarian Church of Evanston who sought to cherish the special gifts of Indian culture and its variety of religions. Members of UCE and Bharat Samaj shared the festivals and holidays of the Hindu faith, along with the festivals and holidays of the Unitarian Universalist tradition. Together we celebrated Diwali, Holi, Christmas, and Earth Day. And through Bharat Samaj, a scattered community of recently immigrant Indians found safe haven in our UCE community. More recently, Eileen Wiviet has invited folk of the various faiths of Evanston to gather and share their experiences and insights, and to encourage spiritual growth through reading the book together, hearing the call across traditions. Our covenant to affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations has informed our entire history of public witness, but especially through the last half-century, as we stood up for the civil rights of several groups of people. We started by standing with our neighbors facing anti-Semitism. In 1954 and again in 1962, ministers and members stood before the Zoning Board of Evanston with our neighbors Beth Emmet to help them win permission to build a home for the first Jewish congregation of Evanston. In the 1960s, in those years of the struggle for racial civil rights, the Reverend Ross Allen Weston and UCE invited several groups and individuals to take the podium at UCE, speaking out for human rights for Black Americans, the Freedom Riders in 1961. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in 1962. Civil rights leaders James Bevel and Diane Nash in 1963, Dick Gregory and the Freedom Singers in 1964. And our public stand during this time led vandals to throw rocks through our north windows in 1963. In the early 1960s, the Reverend Ross Allen Weston and UCE sponsored a program to strengthen the presence of liberal religion in the American South by giving financial assistance and ministerial leadership to the UU Fellowship of Huntsville, Alabama. This at a time when a liberal presence in the South was threatened by racial tensions, and when Unitarian congregations in the South answered the call to be staging platforms for the fight against segregation. In 1965, when Dr. Martin Luther King called for the support of Unitarians in Selma, the congregation took up a collection to send the Reverend Ross Allen Weston. Those of us who remained behind invited the Evanston community into our sanctuary for a memorial service for the Reverend James Reeb, a Unitarian minister who was killed in the racial struggle in Selma. Through the 1960s, members of UCE took up the cause of open housing in Evanston. The campaign for open housing fought the insidious practice among real estate agents of requiring clients to sign a covenant not to sell their homes to black people, often excluding Jewish people as well. In the early 60s, UCE offered a venue for forums focused on the issue. In 1968, our Reverend Charles Edis led a successful campaign for open housing. Building on the foundation of concern already in the congregation when he came to Evanston, Reverend Edis led church members out the doors and to the streets to march. The campaign came to a head the day that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. The black community of Evanston wanted to hold a rally as a memorial to Dr. King. The city officials feared violence. They knew that Reverend Edis and Reverend Jacob Blake of the Ebenezer AME Church in Evanston had won the confidence of a large community of church people in their fight for open housing. The city fathers counted on this relationship when they asked these ministers to lead the rally as a religious service, hoping that people would then be suitably well behaved. The ministers agreed, but asked that in return, the city council pass the Fair Housing Bill, still sitting in their docket. Here is our choir director, Avon Gillespie, leading the rally in song. Although the city council agreed to pass the bill at their next meeting, Charles Edis and Jake Blake decided to hold their feet to the fire and rally folks to march daily until that council meeting. Their marches often stopped on council members' lawns or ended up in front of the mayor's house. The bill was passed at the next council meeting, but it took another 5 years of work, house by house, realtor by realtor, court case by case, to make open and fair housing a reality in Evanston. Members of the congregation worked with the Evanston Human Relations Commission, the League of Women Voters, and the Evanston Ecumenical Action Council. After the Fair Housing campaign was won, Reverend Edis took his marchers onto the line around ETHS to campaign for school integration in 1968. Our most recent effort to promote racial justice is our work with the YWCA. We participate in the Ricky Byrd Song Memorial Race Against Hate. The event commemorates the murder of that popular Northwestern basketball coach by a self-proclaimed white supremacist. Here we stand against racism with the YWCA in 2012. From the early 1990s, the human rights of gay and lesbian folk have figured strongly in our public witness. In the 1990s, for example, UCE gave meeting space to Pride Youth, a new organization for gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered and questioning youth. The program was part of Link's North Shore Youth Health Center in Northfield. In 1990, our Reverend Roger Fritz brought in the AIDS quilt display of the Names Project. The project was started in 1987 in San Francisco to raise awareness of the AIDS pandemic and to commemorate those who died of AIDS-related causes. Often victims of AIDS did not receive funerals, due to the social stigma felt by surviving family members and also due to the outright refusal by many funeral homes and cemeteries to handle the remains. Since survivors often lacked a memorial service or gravesite, the quilt was for many the only opportunity they had to remember and celebrate the lives of their loved ones. The quilt pieces are made by families and friends. Each quilt piece is 3 by 6 feet, and volunteers for the National Names Project stitch them together into 12 by 12 foot panels. Our quilt exhibit then made its way to join a display of the entire quilt on the Mall in Washington, D.C. In 1998, the Welcoming Congregation Group brought to the Evanston community by way of UCE the exhibit Love Makes a Family, portraits of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people and their families. The touring exhibit was developed by the Family Diversity Projects. Through first-person accounts and positive images, this exhibit seeks to challenge and change damaging stereotypes about LGBT people and their families. In 2006, our Welcoming Congregation people brought the Shower of Stoles display to UCE and the Evanston community. The Shower of Stoles is a program of the Institute for Welcoming Resources, which is focused on the LGBT experience in religious communities and is a coalition of Protestant groups supporting welcoming congregation efforts in their denominations and churches. The Shower of Stoles is an extraordinary collection of over 2,000 liturgical stoles and other sacred items representing the lives of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people of faith. These religious leaders serve in 27 denominations and faith traditions and come from 6 countries on 3 continents. This collection celebrates the gifts of LGBT people who serve their faith in countless ways, while also lifting up those who have been excluded from service because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. The project bears witness to the huge loss of leadership that the Church has brought upon itself because of its own unjust policies. Our ministers, Reverend Barbara Peskin and Reverend Ann Tyndall, have donated liturgical stoles to the collection. In 2007, UCE welcomed a workshop offered by the Institute for Welcoming Resources. The workshop gathered some 40 people from Chicago area churches who are working with varying degrees of success to establish in their church communities safe haven for gay, lesbian, transgender, and bisexual folks. At that workshop, our knitting ministry learned from the staff about a conference of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America being held on Navy Pier that summer of 2007. At that conference, the plenary was considering policy changes that would allow clergy to minister to folks in same-sex relationships and to ordain gay and lesbian clergy. The knitting folks decided they could help raise the visibility of the issue by handing out rainbow stoles that supporters of the resolution could wear in silent witness to their conviction. Our knitters recruited folks from UCE and other Unitarian congregations to knit and crochet some 800 rainbow stoles. At the plenary session, the stoles were such a visible demonstration of overwhelming support for the resolution from the rank and file that the governing folks who had expected the resolution not to pass instead listened to the discussion and tabled the issue. 2 years later, in August 2009, the conference met again and passed the resolution. They'd been working on the issue since 2001, and we like to think we might have nudged it toward success. Dateline, Boston, Massachusetts, February 5, 2004. Dozens of clergy from across the state of Massachusetts filled Elliott Hall at UUA headquarters this morning for an event sponsored by the Religious Coalition for the Freedom to Marry. Representatives from the Episcopal, Jewish, Congregational, and Unitarian Universalist faith groups stood in public witness to their support for same-sex marriage and to affirm their opposition to any amendment to the Massachusetts Constitution that would legalize discrimination against the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender citizens of the Commonwealth. To signify their commitment, they hung a banner at 25 Beacon Street across the street from the Massachusetts State House. Civil marriage is a civil right. We at UCE, through a process of discussion, discernment, and finally a vote of yea, resolved to stand publicly also as a congregation in support of gay marriage. In a statement of faith on May 19, 2004, we told the world, "We, the members of the Unitarian Church of Evanston, declare our support for same-sex marriage, and we hang a banner on the east side of the church above the door, proclaiming that civil marriage is a civil right." In July 2006, the year the United States hosted the Summer Olympics in Atlanta, Georgia, the gay and lesbian community of Chicago hosted the Gay Games at sites around the greater Chicago area. A great deal of controversy surrounded that effort, and we at UCE decided to publish our support with a sign on the lawn on Ridge Avenue. The Gay Games is the world's largest sporting and cultural event organized by and specifically for LGBT athletes, artisans, and musicians. It welcomes participants of every sexual orientation and every skill level. Originally called the Gay Olympics, it was started in San Francisco in 1982. The Gay Games brings together people from all over the world, many from countries where homosexuality remains illegal and hidden. And in 2007, we elected to place the rainbow flag on our new church sign as an open-door invitation to the rainbow community. Quite a number of folks have visited because they saw the sign. Our latest stand for human rights focuses on the campaign for workers' rights. In 2005, we began our Fair Trade Fair, allowing us to make more visible the worldwide struggle for workers' rights to fair trade practices. UCE offers a venue for craftspeople to sell their work and for the community of Evanston to focus their consumer energies on the issues of fair labor, workers' rights, and sustainable production practices. It was one of the first such efforts in the Evanston community, and several more organizations have since offered fair trade opportunity. Resistance to war and work for peace seem to be in our Unitarian Universalist DNA as we covenant to promote a peaceful world community. In the early 1980s, the Reverend David Sammons led the congregation in advocating for nuclear disarmament. In 1970, the UN had established the Nuclear Arms Non-Proliferation Treaty and invited nations to sign on to become nuclear weapon-free zones. Over the years, many nations signed on, but the United States did not. So began a grassroots campaign to declare the United States a nuclear weapon-free zone, house by house, neighborhood by neighborhood, city by city. Many UCEers can remember almost weekly marches behind the banner of the North Shore Peace Initiative. To raise the visibility of the cause for a nuclear weapon-free world, and to persuade the city of Evanston to stand for the cause, the North Shore Peace Initiative sought to persuade folk in Evanston to display a sign designating their home a nuclear weapon-free zone. In 1982, we posted the sign on Ridge Avenue, and it remained there for about 10 years. Several other institutions in Evanston, including our neighbors Beth Emmet, put up signs in an effort to influence the City Council to declare all of Evanston a nuclear weapon-free zone, which they did in 1990. In the 1980s and early 90s, UCE, on behalf of the North Shore Peace Initiative, regularly invited the people of the North Shore to peace fairs. Peace fairs were an opportunity for peace organizations to meet the public amidst balloons, games for kids, speakers, and good food. The Bring Them Home Now tour was a rolling anti-war protest in 2005 against the war in Iraq. It began in Crawford, Texas, traveling 3 routes across the country and culminating in a rally in Washington, D.C. in September. The tour came to UCE on Tuesday, September 6. Camp Casey was the name given to the encampment of anti-war protesters outside President Bush's ranch in Crawford, Texas, during his 5-week summer vacation there. The protesters were supporting Cindy Sheehan, the mother of Casey, who died in the war. Cindy Sheehan says of her stop in Evanston, "We had a jam-packed day Tuesday in Chicago. We started the day at the inauguration of a Camp Casey North at the Unitarian Church in Evanston. They had erected a display of crosses accompanied by the boots of fallen soldiers in Iraq and quotations from letters written by their mothers, a solemn reminder of what we as a country have lost. It was a powerful opening of the day to remind us why we're doing this and that the country is with us." On Memorial Day 2006, we began our campaign, Remember Their Names. For a month of Sundays, members of our congregation recited the names of soldiers and civilians killed in Iraq to call us to remember the tragedy of that war. Members of UCE participated in an Evanston-wide interfaith fast for peace in 2007 in solidarity with the program Troops Home Fast to protest the war in Iraq. The rolling fast began August 6th and rolled through 5 faith groups before ending September 21st in a candlelight vigil in Fountain Square. In 2008, UCE erected a peace pole in solidarity with the peace pole movement around the world. A peace pole is a handcrafted monument that displays the message and prayer, "May peace prevail on earth," on each of its 4 sides in different languages. There are tens of thousands of peace poles in 180 countries all over the world, which serve as a constant reminder to us to visualize and pray for world peace. When you plant a peace pole in your community, you are linking with people all over the world who have planted peace poles in the same spirit. UCE members joined with the North Shore Peace Initiative on Mother's Day 2009 for Take Back Mother's Day for Peace. The program in downtown Evanston called attention to the original meaning of Mother's Day. The day was established by peace activist Julia Ward Howe to be a time when mothers stood against war and the killing of sons, theirs and any other mothers. Julia Ward Howe stated her sentiments thus: "Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We, the women of one country, will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs." Our Mary Dudek presented Julia Ward Howe, and Mary is definitely more cheerful and charming than that original lady. In May 2011, the Peace and Justice Program invited Afghan youth peace volunteers into our space to share their work for peace in the war-torn country. A small group of young people in the Bamiyan province of Afghanistan are sharing their call for understanding in order that they could experience peace someday in their country. In their own words, "We work to build a grassroots movement for nonviolence in Afghanistan. This would be part of a wider hope to organize nonviolent options for the world. We envision organizing this as a global tree of blue-scarfed individuals and communities who would urgently work together with love as people who would commit to non-killing, true-to-people options in Tunisia, Egypt, Yemen, Lebanon, America, and everywhere." UCE participated in the Peaceable Cities Walk and Talk Evanston in September 2001. Their mission was transforming our city through dialogue on this anniversary of the tragedy of 9/11/2001. The walk moved from the Muslim Community Center, Daras Sunna Masjid in North Evanston, to the Jewish Reconstructionist Congregation of Evanston on the south side. We continue participation in what has become an annual event. We have lately developed a practice of standing out on Ridge and waving at the traffic passing by, with banners and placards advertising our values, especially our wish for peace and an end to war. Here are young folks from the youth conference demonstrating for peace. and some of us went to Washington to stand as witness to anti-war sentiments. Finally, but hopefully not finally, our UCE community has been in the Evanston 4th of July parade with our vision and values writ large upon our banners and faces.